Ready to hit the pause button on your parenting fails? Ready to feel better about your parenting? Welcome to Parenting Pause, the podcast, where all of you is welcome and where you can listen in on how other parents became the parents they always dreamed of being. I'm Leslie Potter, the founder of the Pure Joy Parenting Way. I'm a mother, a parenting coach, and a fellow traveler on this journey to wake up in our parenting. And I believe together we can make this a better world for ourselves and our kiddos. I'm really thrilled to have you with me today to share a little bit about you and your family and your experience. So maybe you could start us off giving us a little introduction into your family configuration.
My name is Lindsay, and I have two children. I have a girl who is 7, and I have a boy who is 4.
I know you've been doing conscious parenting from the beginning. I know you read a lot and you've really taken that to heart. So I wonder if you could talk about your experience with what it might have been missing in the conceptual model of conscious parenting and what you found, what brought you this way to the Pure Joy way.
When my daughter was in utero, I always knew that I wanted to be a mother. I've always been obsessed with babies, and I've always also been a perfectionist and wanted to do well. And so, of course, as soon as my baby got in my belly, I knew I wanted to be the perfect mother.
Of course you did, Lindsay.
You can see where this is going. It was just so interesting because as soon as she was born, I was just watching my birth video with a friend the other day, which I don't do that often, but she asked to see it. And, she just screamed in my face as soon as she was born, which, as you know, is a very healthy response for an infant. But it was really jarring to me. And early on in parenting, I was finding that, my perfectionism wasn't really working well for anyone, and I didn't know what to do. And I am so grateful that I got some really wonderful support around conscious parenting and just kind of understanding children and the best way to care for them. Because a lot of times in the early days, when I would be trying conscious parenting and it wouldn't be necessarily working, I had a lot of old conditioning beliefs around me from other people about babies need to cry it out and they need discipline and, this kind of stuff. And I was really trying to do things a different way. And then once my daughter was a toddler, in the conscious parenting model, or from what I took from it, which went through my lens of my perfectionism, whenever my daughter was acting out, I felt like a failure. And I felt like I wasn't, or especially if I would get upset, I would just feel like a failure. And especially if other people would see me acting this way, because I was still kind of trying to prove my way that gentle parenting could really work. And then whenever my daughter would do totally normal things that 2-year-olds do, I would just feel like a failure and feel really alone. And I think that was when I came to you, was when my daughter was actually starting to hit me around 4. And I, read all this stuff, and I was really trying to be, so conscious about it. And I think it was a birthday call that you offered, and I, for the first time, really felt seen and heard for what was getting triggered in me. I was sharing with you about how my daughter had been hitting me and how I was, really trying to go at it the conscious way, and obviously I just wanted her to stop hitting me. And for the first time when I worked with you, I really felt like you brought me as a person into my parenting to feel really seen and heard and understood. Your work had this huge next level of involving me as an individual and my, systems and my triggers and my early conditioning. And I had really been missing out on that. I had just been projecting it all onto my children.
Well, it's such a beautiful story, and it's so touching for me because I feel this was a lot of my journey too. I think so many of us have this, as you described, this perfection and this desire. It's just this huge desire to give to our children what we didn't get ourselves. I feel this deep,
Yeah.
deep honoring of you and how
Thank
painful that can be, right? To give and give and give, and yet to realize our children, as I say, they didn't get the memo that they were supposed to come back here, right? And validate us and appreciate us,
you.
right?
Right.
And it sounds kind of silly for us to say it now, but I think there's such a place, a longing in mamas. I just want to honor that this deep longing that,
Yes.
right, that we give so much and we just want a little crumb, like a little thank
Yes.
you. Right?
Yes.
And over time, when we don't get that, like what you're describing, it builds up. And then all of a sudden, when your child exhibits a normal behavior, often with toddlers, they may hit because they're trying to
Mhm.
communicate something to you. It can just trigger this
Mhm.
huge flood and wave, right, of pain and suffering.
And I just loved that in your work that you acknowledge that so openly. You looked on Mother's Day, nobody was saying, I love being a mother and I love it when my toddler hits me in the face.
I remember us once having a conversation about, because you make the most beautiful Christmas card and you have your fancy, dresses and beauty. And we were laughing about maybe putting on the other side, the house a mess and the kids throwing food. So we
Yeah, the
could see both
reality
sides.
of the day to day, what goes on behind the card. I know, so true. And that's why I loved your work. It just felt so liberating to have a place where we could go into all of that. Yeah.
Well, I think we forget this with our children too. If you're nice, you've got to be mean also. I mean, you've got both in there. And you can't be generous without being stingy. We forget that we live in this relative world where you're going to have the polarities of both. And many of us trying to be conscious. A mama told me the other day, the only rule in our house is to be kind. And I said, well, what happens when you're not kind? Right? Because be kind for us has become a behavioral model, right? A behavior that means treat someone in a certain way. And kindness, for me at least, it embraces all of us, especially our shadow
Mm.
side, right? Can we
Mhm.
offer kindness to ourselves when we act out? Can we offer
Mm.
kindness to the feelings that are driving those behaviors? And I found as a mother, and I know you did too, that I was so incredibly brutal and aggressive toward myself when I didn't perform in the way I
Yeah.
had an expectation, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I think that was really the thing that I learned from you is that if I am want to be kind to my daughter all the time, then I'm going to have to learn how to be kind to myself.
You bet. And how did you learn to do that? Because I know you've been practicing.
It's an ongoing practice, and I'm just on Mother's Day. I lost it on my kids, and I'm like, okay, what would it be like instead of going down, beating myself up, or blaming somebody else, to just say like, wow, you're having a hard day. I love your practice of the safe seat, which is just when you get triggered, which when you have small children can happen many, many times a day, to just sit down right there in it and just kind of gently pull away your first reactions, your gut reactions of wanting to yell or beat up yourself, and just kind of look at like, whoa, what's going on here, and can I be kind to myself in this moment?
And it's really challenging, isn't it? I
It's
mean,
really challenging.
to find that immediacy, to come back to the immediate experience, because we've talked about on these podcasts. I just want to reiterate to folks, when you're triggered, you're not really in that present moment. You have regressed back into a time when an early feeling will be arising, and it can be very, very challenging to pause in that moment and attend to the immediacy of what's going on in your body.
It is very, very challenging. And this is where I think for me, your work really resonated, because I have a, pretty extensive background in like yoga and meditation, and just dovetailed so beautifully with all of that work to be able to shift my level of awareness, which is still really, really hard to do when I'm in the parenting role, especially when my other triggers come into play.
Yeah, maybe you could have an example, like maybe you're at the park and people are watching you and your kid acts out. Probably your kids never do this, but maybe
But just imagine.
or your boy takes all his clothes off. I know he's a naked boy, or something.
Yes.
Maybe you could describe for
You
everybody
know,
an example.
this is so interesting because I feel like it was so funny. Of course, yes, it happens all the time. And gosh, I can think of like 4 in the past week. It's interesting because now I feel like part of the practice is also modeling for other people around me. Yeah, this just happens. This is just part of motherhood and parenthood and small children and being human. Because I used to just get so embarrassed, and now it's almost like I'm like, oh, okay, let's see how I can work with this. Like, let's see what it feels like. Oh, I'm noticing I'm really embarrassed right now. And it's interesting too because I don't think of myself as being like the part of myself that's embarrassed is so hidden under so many layers. And it's interesting because my daughter gets so embarrassed, and it always annoys me. I'm like, stop being embarrassed. And it's funny. I'm like, oh, I get so embarrassed. Last week when I'm going to pick up my daughter from school and it's the afternoon and everybody's kind of crispy and there's the ice cream truck, which drives me crazy that there's an ice cream truck outside of her school. And of course, my 4-year-old son hears the music and is like, I want an ice cream. And proceeds to have this huge meltdown about it. I would just really slow everything down and notice in me that I'm really feeling rage, that the ice cream truck is there, that I have to like pick my daughter up, that my son is screaming, and then just kind of open to like, well, this is what's happening right now, and he's screaming and it's really loud, and it's okay if he screams. It's okay for me to hold him if he's screaming, and all the moms are kind of like nodding at me and acknowledging it, and I can ask someone to keep an eye on my daughter while we go and get in the super long, hot, sweaty, loud line for my son to get ice cream.
It's really different, isn't it, to be able to
It's
tolerate that rage and then the powerlessness feelings underneath and not react or respond out of them.
it's very different, and the beautiful thing was it just passes so much more quickly. Like in the old way, I would have maybe lost it or had gotten everybody in the car really quickly and gone home and yelled at them or beat myself up or wondering what I was doing wrong. And now it's just like, oh, he's a 4-year-old who wants ice cream. We can get him ice cream or not. And then like we just go to the playground.
I was sitting with one of our favorite teachers last night, Bruce Tift. And
Oh,
if you
yes.
don't know Bruce, check him out. He has an
Yes.
amazing book called Already Free. And I was sitting with him last night and we were in a supervision group, and I got to be the person in the hot seat. And I love and hate being in the hot seat with Bruce because I never know what's going to come up. But it was so beautiful. We were talking about when a feeling arises for me, and this would be for you too, like rage. And then he would just like say, put a period behind it. Just rage, period, right?
Yeah.
Powerless, period. Instead of, oh my God, I'm enraged, and that means I'm a bad mother, and it means this, and it means my kids this, and that, and the other. It's just the word in the dictionary. Okay, you're going to use it in your story a lot. Rage, period. But that's what this just reminded me of that. And made me think that's what you did. You just went rage. And that's what I want people to know in this model. This isn't trying to repress rage. This isn't trying not to have rage. This isn't trying to get rid of anything. It's to actually open to that experience, which you did, rage, and it stopped right there, period. And that's the kindness, can I be kind to what is arising without giving it meaning, without giving it power, without acting it out? That's it. Rage, period.
And it was interesting because then I saw another mother who's actually a therapist, and she was kind of commiserating with me, like, oh my gosh, one of my son was having a meltdown in the grocery store, and I saw a client, and I hid from her because I didn't want her to see me not doing well with the meltdown, which not even that she wasn't or was doing well with it. And I'm like, that's where to me it gets really interesting to be able to model, even when our children have meltdowns, even when we have meltdowns, we can still stay with ourselves. It's not something we have to like hide or feel bad about.
I think that's why I created this podcast, is so we can, because I think that is our service now, is to role model to others, because we have such a culture that is filled with competitiveness and shame and trying to look good. I have thrown my daughter under the bus so many times. It just became an honor for me when I was able, as you're saying, to stay with myself and with my daughter, and then therefore
Mm-hmm.
to role model to others that this is a possibility now.
It's really funny, and it's very humbling because we don't get to get up on our high horse, which I love my high horse. A friend was just talking to me. I'm like, did you hear me yelling at my husband? She's like, did you hear me yelling at my kids? I know he's only 5 and he wasn't ready. And she's like, and I know that he's supposed to lose it. I'm like, and sometimes we do too.
Yeah, and I think it's such a little bit of a shadow side in the conscious parenting, because I know when I heard conscious parenting, I thought it was all peaceful and all loving and all about connection, connection, connection. And fortunately, I ran into Bruce and began to learn the healthy other side of how healthy and important separation is. And I know that's been a big piece for you too.
I love like when we used to talk about the hula hoop, which you taught us about, which was like you're having your experience, your child is having their experience, and you can open, to their experience just a little bit, like share a little bit of your hula hoop. But the moment that I go all the way in their hula hoop, then I lose connection to my own, being and central nervous system, which is really what they need access to. So I know we talked a lot about, as a recovering attachment parent in your work, that like if we go into the meltdown with them, then we are going to lose what they need to attach to.
Absolutely. My friend Tammy calls it staying in your own lane.
Yeah, swim in your lane. Yep.
The perfect example is you with your son, because when he's in his desire, his just desperation, and it feels like life or death. And of course, your system, I want parents to understand, your system is going to get activated, which yours dead. And you start getting the signal like danger, danger, danger.
Life or death.
Right. But the beauty of this work is that you've learned to be able to go, oh, rage, pause, powerlessness, pause, right? And stay with the intensity that your son has thrown you. He's thrown you the hot potato, but you have learned to ride that energy and to stay with it. And so it can move through. They say it takes 90 seconds for it to physiologically move through you if you don't add story, if you don't, when you have a charge like rage and it go pause or period, if you can stay there and not add meaning and story, it will, as you're so beautifully saying, move through and move back to regulation. What a powerful thing.
It is so powerful. And I want to share one of your other brilliant pearls that I loved, which is one of the hardest emotion, I think, for me, and maybe for a lot of parents and mothers, is that I'm okay and you're not. And that's always something that I can repeat to myself. Like, it's okay for me to be okay in this moment and not go down the rabbit hole of dysregulation. Yeah.
And it's so powerful, especially, I believe, for mamas, because we are taught that we're always supposed to stay connected, and that's kind of how I read attachment parenting. I think you did too. I don't know that they're
Mhm.
saying that, but that's what I took it to be, right? It felt so good to try to get what I hadn't had as a child. But the piece that I forgot was the healthy separation. And that's what we're talking about right now for folks that are listening in. Just these metaphors. We're saying, I'm okay, even when you're not, and to stay in your own lane and to stay in your hula hoop. That's one of the greatest gifts you give your children, because they will throw you the hot potato. They're going to throw you every feeling that they have, and they're looking at you and going like, well, what do we do with these feelings, right? What do we do with annihilatory panic, as Bruce would say? What do
Yes.
we do with powerlessness? What do we do with feelings of rejection? And in
Mm.
this work, if you're able to safe seat and able to stay with them and go, powerlessness, period, rejection, period, and let those feelings move through you, you become a safe base for your children at that point and become
Mm.
that role model for them to know that, their feelings and they will pass.
One of the other really powerful things that we did, and this is a great exercise to do, is when your children are doing a behavior that you find unsavory or get embarrassed of or whatever, like what is the benefit of that behavior, or what could a benefit of that behavior be? And that was a really powerful exercise for me to do, of like, what's the benefit of my daughter knowing how to hit, or what's the benefit of my daughter being able to scream, or what's the benefit of my daughter sticking up for herself and, not wanting to share something. And that was really transformative. And then being able to see that in my own behavior too. Other thing that I wanted to say was, it was so powerful to be in the group with you because of the way that we were able to go into the shadows with such support and see all of the emotions that I feel like we hide so much around motherhood. And I just remember one of the most profound things was when somebody would be crying on a call or dealing with some really intense emotions, normally with crying or sobbing or melting down, how you just always held the space so beautifully, and how you would say, like, I just want to normalize this response. And that was really, really profound for me.
I am so touched. All the groups are magical,
Mhm.
but it's so powerful
Ah.
to see how we can come together. As I say, I don't see myself as an expert. I see myself as a mama. I see myself as an inquirer. I see myself as a practitioner of working deeply with the shadow, and to have such blessed beings as you to come and enter in and offer yourself and offer the work back out now, which I know you're doing. I
Mhm.
so deeply appreciate. The thing I love about doing these interviews the most is everybody's going, well, my house still actually looks the same. My kids still act out and they scream and they still want ice cream, but I have such a different experience. I think that
Yeah.
is the most potent thing that I keep hearing, is that we separate out enough to let our kids be kids, to let them have these big, giant, incredible feelings that they're having without taking it so personally. Thank you so much for being with me today. It's such a deep, deep pleasure to talk with you. And I appreciate all that you give to yourself, to your children, and to the world.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's such an honor to be able to reflect on this work, and I am so, so grateful for you for being truly a pioneer in this realm.
Thank you to Lindsay for joining me today to share her deep wisdom and how she continues to show up in the present to be the parent she wants to be. Parenting Paused is produced by Kim Paletti at Sound Mind Productions. Music by Jan Perchik. You can find the show notes at www.purejoyparenting.com, where you'll get access to the foundational practice of Pure Joy, the safe seat, and find links to relevant topics, as well as a transcription of the show. And if this work inspires you and you would like to practice, come join us in my free Pure Joy Parenting Practice group. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for being here today and listening to the Parenting Pause podcast, your partner and support in finding the joy in yourself and with your children. And remember, if you're about to scream, pause.